The moment your heart stops beating, something extraordinary happens. Science calls it death, but for your soul, it is only the beginning. What you are about to discover now, almost no one dares to speak about. Stay with me until the end, because what you're going to feel may completely change the way you see life and what comes after. And if you feel that this is your moment to awaken, subscribe now to this channel, because here we reveal secrets that transform fear into freedom and endings into new beginnings. When the physical body reaches its limit and the heart stops beating, many believe that everything ends in that instant. But countless reports of near-death experiences show a very different reality. People who were declared clinically dead recount with astonishing detail that their consciousness did not fade away, it expanded. They describe floating above their bodies, observing doctors working to revive them, hearing conversations that took place outside the room, and even perceiving events in distant locations. This panoramic vision of existence shows that consciousness is not a product of the brain, but something independent that remains active even when biology falls silent. It's as if, in the instant of death, an invisible door is opened, and what was always trapped within. US is finally set free to explore more subtle and luminous dimensions. One of the most documented and studied cases was that of Pam Reynolds, an American singer who had to undergo a delicate brain surgery. To perform the procedure, doctors induced a state of clinical death. No pulse, no breathing, and no brain activity. In this state, Pam described leaving her body and watching the entire surgery from above. She reported details about surgical instruments she had never seen before and described exact conversations between the doctors. These details were later confirmed, proving that her experience could not have been imagination. Pam was clinically dead, but her consciousness was lucid, active, and attentive, as if she had accessed a greater dimension of reality. This case completely challenged the materialist view of death and opened the way for serious scientists to recognize that consciousness does not depend solely on the physical body to exist. Another remarkable case is that of Dr. Eben Alexander, a renowned neurosurgeon and skeptic of spiritual experiences. After contracting a rare bacterial meningitis, he entered a deep coma for 7 days. His brain was inactive in all higher functions, incapable of producing dreams or hallucinations. Yet, he reported one of the richest expansions of consciousness ever recorded. He described being transported to a realm of pure light, love, and wisdom, accompanied by a welcoming presence that communicated without words. The most striking thing is that, as a scientist, he knew all the biological mechanisms involved and affirmed, "No medical explanation can justify what I lived. Consciousness exists beyond the brain." His story was documented in the book Proof of Heaven, which became a worldwide bestseller and changed how millions of people view death. These accounts are not isolated. Thousands of people across different cultures describe similar phenomena. The pattern is almost always the same: a sensation of detachment from the body, an expanded vision of the environment, an indescribable peace, and the certainty that consciousness continues. Conventional science tries to explain these phenomena as illusions caused by lack of oxygen in the brain. But it cannot explain how people blind from birth describe visual scenes in precise detail during their nor how unconscious patients recount conversations happening in nearby rooms. These facts make it clear that there is something beyond the materialist view. The body may stop, but consciousness stays awake and continues the journey. The crossing of consciousness is like the first step of a long voyage. The body is left behind, but the essence moves forward into a territory of infinite possibilities. It is an abrupt awakening, but also a liberation, because in that instant the soul realizes it was never limited by matter. Physical life, with all its joys and sorrows, was only a temporary scenario, a stage for learning. Seeing itself beyond the body, the soul understands it was never truly imprisoned, and that death is not an enemy, but a passage. It is in this state that consciousness prepares to encounter the field of light, a vibrational space that does not judge, but reflects exactly who you are. And in that reflection begins the most profound revelation of the afterlife journey. Immediately after this crossing, many people report a striking vision, a tunnel of light, as if a gentle yet irresistible force was guiding them into a space of pure luminosity. This light is not cold but warm, welcoming, indescribably loving. Unlike any physical brightness, it radiates understanding, healing, and peace. The most surprising thing is that, despite cultural differences, this phenomenon appears in reports from people all over the world. Individuals who never knew one another, who did not share religious beliefs, described the same sensation, being embraced by an intelligent light that seems to know every detail of their existence. At this point, many realize that death is not absence but presence, a presence so profound it dissolves all fear. A well-known example is that of Betty Eddy, author of Embraced by the Light. During surgery, she entered a state of clinical death and described traveling through a tunnel until she reached a radiant light. But the most impactful detail was how she felt, not just observed, but completely known and accepted by this light. Betty said that presence enveloped her with a love so vast there was no comparison to anything she had ever lived on earth. For her, it was not just a physical light, but a conscious field reflecting back everything she carried in her soul. This experience transformed her and made her dedicate her life to sharing the certainty that there is something beyond death. Other reports speak of encounters with loved ones who had already passed away within this light. People claim to have embraced parents, children, grandparents, or friends who had departed, describing those experiences as more real than any earthly memory. One of the best-known stories is that of George Ritchie, a physician who had an NDE during World War II. He affirmed that he encountered luminous beings who guided him through different dimensions, showing realities shaped by the vibrations of souls themselves. Ritchie returned convinced that every thought and emotion molds what we experience after death. What he witnessed was not judgment but reflection. The field displayed exactly what the soul carried within. This point is fundamental. The field of light does not punish or reward. It simply reflects. If you've lived with love, you will see that love multiplied in forms, colors, and presences. If you lived with fear or anger, you will encounter dense landscapes that correspond to that state. There are no external heavens or hells as geographical places. What exists are states of consciousness manifested inevitably in the afterlife field. Even during life, we already experience fragments of this. Moments of fulfillment connect us to heaven, while moments of hatred bring us closer to hell. But after death, this reflection becomes absolute, without masks, without illusions. It is like looking into a cosmic mirror that reveals with precision who you truly are. And this mirror is at the same time liberating and transformative, because in it you understand that nothing you lived was wasted. Every emotion generated a real reflection. This experience makes the soul realize that life was never random, but a field of spiritual training. What you feel and think does not vanish. It shapes what you will encounter after death. This is a powerful revelation, because it means we are constantly creating not only our earthly lives, but also the reality we will live when we depart. And it is before this reflection that the next inevitable step of the afterlife journey arises, the life review, where everything you will returns to be felt in its entirety. One of the most impressive phenomena reported in near-death experiences is the so-called life review. But unlike what many religious traditions have taught, there is no tribunal, no judge, no eternal condemnation. What happens is much deeper. The soul dives into an expanded consciousness where it relives every moment of its life. Only this Chimi, not just as the protagonist, but also as all the people involved. You feel the joy you caused when you made someone smile, and also the pain when you wounded with words or actions. It is as if the universe opened a transparent book and said, here's everything you were. No masks, no excuses, no justifications. The writer Anita Morjani lived this in an extraordinary way. Diagnosed with terminal cancer, she fell into a deep coma and was declared near death. During this time, she reported leaving her body and entering a state of consciousness where she revisited her entire life. But the most impactful part was not just reliving events, it was feeling their origin. Anita realized how her fears, her need to please others, and the repression of her own essence had contributed to her illness. She was not judged by an external force, but understood with absolute clarity that her physical condition was a direct reflection of her unlived soul. When she returned, she awoke with an inexplicable healing. The cancer had vanished. Her experience was recorded in the book Dying to Be Me, which became a worldwide reference on NDE. Another transformative case is that of Howard Storm, a university professor and staunch atheist. After suffering a severe stomach perforation, he had an NDE that began in a terrifying way. He described finding himself in a dark environment, surrounded by beings reflecting his inner state of selfishness, arrogance, and disbelief. But in a moment of despair, he cried out for help and was enveloped by a presence of indescribable light. This presence guided him through a review of his life, where he felt the impact of his attitudes on others. Storm realized that his lack of compassion had left deep marks on the people around him. Upon returning to his body, he became a pastor and dedicated his life to spreading love and spirituality. completely transformed by the experience. These accounts confirm a universal truth. The life review is not punishment, but learning. Every gesture, no matter how small, leaves imprints on the fabric of existence. A simple act of kindness can illuminate paths you could never imagine, while a cruel word can weigh like centuries. The review makes the soul realize that there are no isolated actions. Everything reverberates. Everything returns. This is the greatest lesson in empathy a being can ever live. Feeling in one's own skin the effects of one's choices. It is in this moment that the soul understands it was never separate from others, that we have always been part of a single living network of consciousness. And it is precisely this awakening that opens the way for the next stage. Because after feeling, understanding, and integrating all that it has been, the soul does not remain stagnant. It prepares for something even greater, the conscious choice of what will come next. It is at this point that the mystery of death reveals its deepest secret. Life does not end with the last breath. It continues in other realms, in other forms, in other journeys that give meaning to everything we live here. And it is in the interval between lives that the soul discovers the true purpose of death. After the life review, the soul does not get lost in a void or trapped in endless waiting. What happens next is far more organized and profound than most people imagine. Numerous accounts of spiritual experiences, memory, and NDEs point to the existence of a transitional state, a realm of consciousness where the soul rests, reorganizes, and decides the next steps of its journey. It is as if death were, in fact, an intermission between chapters of an infinite book. And in this interval, the soul reconnects with a greater wisdom, understanding that each life was chosen as part of a continuous growth plan. Nothing was by chance, neither joys, nor pains, nor seemingly random encounters. Everything was part of a script written even before birth. The researcher, Dr. Mikhail Newton, a hypnotherapist who devoted decades to studying between life, recorded hundreds of consistent accounts describing this state. In his book, Journey of Souls, he reveals how people in deep hypnosis accessed memories of what they experienced after death and before rebirth. The pattern repeated itself: encounters with soul groups, dialogues with spiritual guides, and a process of consciously choosing the next incarnation. Patients described in detail how they analyzed past lives, understood the lessons they had gained, and chose new experiences to help them evolve further. These memories, emerging from individuals of different cultures, demonstrated the existence of a greater plan guiding our existence. A powerful example from these studies is the testimony of people who remembered choosing specific families before birth, even when they knew it would be difficult. They explained that they wanted to learn lessons of forgiveness, courage, or compassion, and that certain relationships would be the key to that growth. Some even said that certain romantic or painful encounters were arranged before life began. This vision gives a new meaning to human challenges. Nothing is punishment, but opportunity. Even the most painful experiences can be understood as part of a broader process of soul evolution. This perspective completely transforms how we face difficulties. Another point described in regressions is the sense of reunion with the so-called soul group. People recount recognizing consciousnesses with whom they had shared multiple lives as if they were a spiritual family supporting one another across incarnations. This reunion brings a feeling of homecoming, of belonging, as if the soul finally returned home after a long journey. Many also describe spiritual councils composed of higher beings who assist in the process of review and decision of the next destiny. Not as judges, but as loving mentors who help the soul reflect on its choices with clarity. This process is described as deeply liberating because it shows there is no imposition, only learning. The hidden purpose of death, therefore, is not the end of existence, but its expansion. The soul does not cease to be, but returns to a higher state of awareness where it can freely choose its next step. This revelation dissolves fear and invites us to live with more courage here and now. Because if death is only a pause, a transition, then we truly have nothing to lose. Each life is a school, and each death a graduation. When we understand this, we stop seeing death as an enemy and begin to see it as an ally. It is the proof that we are eternal cosmic travelers in constant evil. And perhaps that is the greatest secret of all. No matter how many times the body falls silent, the soul will always find a new beginning. The truth is that while the body goes silent, the soul never ceases to exist. Death is not an end. It is simply the changing of garments, the return home, the reunion with who we truly are. When you understand this, fear disappears, and life gains a new meaning. Every act of love echoes in eternity, every choice becomes a lesson, and nothing is ever lost. Death is not darkness, but a new dawn. If this message touched your soul, subscribe now to the channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today, because the end we fear so much is, in fact, the greatest beginning there is.